Do you think that a person or a society can get so bogged down by details and trivialities that they miss out on the thing that they actually need? What do I mean by this? Well, I think there is such a thing as almost overloading on an attempt to be fair to other cultures that goes beyond just being respectful. Let me be even more specific. There's a lot of talk right now about misappropriation, misappropriation, misappropriation. Okay, if you are a person who is wearing a ceremonial Native American headdress and you are not initiated into that tradition, notice I said initiated, not necessarily from that background, because sometimes people not from the background of the tradition they're in are initiated into said traditions. So let's say you're a person who is roaming around out in public with a Native American headdress on and you're not initiated and you're doing it disrespectfully, or you're desecrating a sacred Aboriginal sacred site or a medicine object, or any of these things that common sense would tell you you shouldn't do that because it's disrespectful to the culture, to the people who value these, and to the tradition itself. Even if there's no living person left of that culture, which is horrible to think about. But on the other hand, let's say it's something from an ancient time where there aren't any, surviving people or that we know of. That's one thing, okay? Let's put all those people to the side who are doing those things disrespectfully and just stop thinking about them for a minute, okay? All right, now let's talk about the rest of the people who understand that you're supposed to treat others with respect, whether you are familiar with the culture that they live in or the traditions that they practice, or whether you're not familiar with the culture or traditions they practice. But you understand this because maybe you've learned it the hard way, or maybe you grew up that way, or maybe you just have common sense that it's a good idea to be respectful to people who aren't exactly like you, or maybe didn't grow up exactly like you, which is fine. And maybe you're one of those people. Sometimes we're all from mixed backgrounds and mixed situations so that we've had a variety of experiences. But you would never know this if you go on social media, because all you hear about on social media is two things, and it's not the third. You hear the extremists who are, being racist, and, they're being not just white against black, but they're being, racist towards traditional indigenous cultures. They're being, or they're just, and it doesn't even have to be race or ethnicity. It can be anything. They're not approving of lifestyles. They just have a whole, okay, we know about them, all right? Then you have another group of people who aren't as damaging as the first group, but they're really not helping. And in fact, sometimes they do damage things. And what this group of people is doing, and I'm speaking to this group right now, because I can't do a whole lot to change people being racist and fascist. I can try, and I will continue to try. But this second group of people who considers themselves not racist, not fascist, they consider themselves somebody who treats people with equality, who treats others, and they probably do. But what they're doing that's very harmful, in my opinion, is they're policing the internet and talking to people and telling them, well, you can't practice something because you're not from that heritage. They could be somebody from the British Isles and says, you need to investigate and research when such and such happens on this exact date with this exact set of conditions because you're misappropriating the information. That's one possibility. Another one is, and it's also common to hear this same kind of person say, what you're doing is neo-pagan or New Age. You'll hear that a lot. And it's used, the phrase New Age is used in a way that is very, demoralizing, in a way to discredit somebody. That's one possibility. Another possibility is if you're in North America, you'll hear a lot of people running around the internet saying, you can't use sage because it's misappropriation of a Native American culture. And the person who says this is not an elder themselves, doesn't know anything about anything, doesn't know the specific situation of sage, whether it is, doesn't know who they're talking to in terms of, what specific conditions are they talking about. Like, so the company, I won't name the company, but there was a cosmetic company that started, using bulk amounts of sage in their makeup products and marketing them towards Native American, like using like this kind of Native American commodification, which is totally disrespectful, by the way. But that's a specific issue. Now that would be misappropriation. And I could say, okay, the person has a point who says, don't use the sage in this particular product that this particular company is marketing because they're exploiting it, okay, without respect for them, okay? But that's not enough for these people. They can't go issue by issue, this kind of person that loves to the misappropriation police people. What they like to do is take an issue, like a specific issue like that, which is a huge deal, and I would totally support that person if they talk just about that or just about a list of issues like, particular, government contracts about, fracking on sacred lands. Totally. In fact, I've been opposing these things for over 10 years. So I understand what they're talking about there. And I totally support that. But I'm not talking about those people either, because I support those people. I'm talking about somebody who's decided that they've become the policing of everybody, who's trying to get in touch with either a plant spirit that grows on the land that they live on, such as sage, such as tobacco, such as, ginseng, or such as anything that people use. When I say use, I mean there's a lot of people who are practicing herbalists or who work with plant spirits who understand that there's a cycle of reciprocity. Okay? Well, maybe if we talked more about that, and those are principles that you will find in indigenous cultures. And how do I know that? Because I've been around indigenous people and I've learned a lot of things from them, and I've learned from people who've learned from indigenous people. And that's a very common, yet never talked about thing. There's probably a handful of people I can think of who actually talk about it on the internet. But there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there policing and telling you, you shouldn't use sage because, it's offensive to, and it's misappropriation of the Native American. No, not necessarily. Okay, that's not entirely, and where did you hear that from, and who told you that, and what particular elder was it? Because they probably would have said it in a much more specific way. If it's from a specific ceremony that they're talking about, okay, fine. You're right, that's off limits. If they're saying you can't use sage to conduct a certain ceremony because that's not authorized, I totally agree with that. But that's not enough for these people. These people have to completely generalize to the point where what they're doing is they're scaring people who are trying to connect with either a plant spirit, An animal spirit, their own land, not necessarily their land, but land that they live on, and they're denying them by almost like by kind of like peer pressure and shaming, verbal shaming, or internet messaging of shaming, of this kind of fear-based policing, using the word misappropriation. It can almost paralyze somebody to the point where they think, well, okay, I can't use this because that's going to misappropriate something, and I can't do that because that's going to misappropriate. And okay, what can I do? You know, what can I do? Well, this is where I'm here to tell you that the simple answer to all of this is it's much more complicated than that. What I mean by that is each of these issues is not, it's not a simple thing where if you hear somebody say, you shouldn't use sage because that's misappropriating the Native American culture, I'd be very suspicious of such a vaguely generalized statement like that isn't very specific. Where did this person get that information from? I'm not saying it's not true, but that there's just something really, I think, overly, it's harmful to people who want an animistic relationship. What do I mean by that? Guess what? Animism, the belief that something has a soul or spirit, is inherent whether you're white, black, Asian, Latino, Native American, Filipino, Australian, British, South American. I'm just trying to name as many different kinds of people. I don't care where you're from on this planet Earth. You have a right to have an animistic relationship, which means you can relate to a plant spirit. You can relate to and sometimes that actually means having to work with a physical example, a physical, tangible example of that plant spirit. If that's sage, unless somebody tells you it's totally endangered, we really don't want anyone using it. And again, I would still even say in what region, because something can be endangered in one region and not in another part of the world. You know, and I would say, okay, well, where can I go to ethically, you know, obtain such a thing? If something's illegal, then you might have to find in one country and not, you know, it's legal in one country but not legal in another country. You might have to find a similar plant that will assimilate. It will never be the same, but it will assimilate the effects. Not necessarily, we're not talking about ingesting here all the time. You know, everyone thinks, oh, plant spirit, that means I'm going to pop it down my throat and, you know, or drink it or snort it or whatever. This is not about getting high, okay? And I'm just talking about plant spirits right now. I haven't even started to tell you about animal spirits and stone spirits. But unfortunately, people are having a knee-jerk reaction and using this word misappropriation. I hate to say this, they're misappropriating the word misappropriation without knowing what they're talking about. And I may not have all the actual, you know, academic sources to back me up about things, but I've done enough research on my own, and I've talked to enough indigenous people, and I've been initiated into traditions, and I've learned enough so far to say that there's a significant amount of information on the internet that is deliberately scaring people from learning about their own animistic nature. And this really, as you can tell, really bothers me because it's so paralyzing to people. If they're constantly being told, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that, well, what can they do? What can they do? You know, it's hard enough to get people to actually, you know, start to do something that has been dead for so long, and that is to relate to a altered state of consciousness or relate to something that you've been taught for your entire life is just an object, when in reality it's not just an object, it's not a piece of property. It's a spirit in its own right, whatever that is, a stone, an animal spirit that doesn't even take shape into a physical animal, or the experiences you have that with trees or with water or whatever, whether you have medicine objects, I'm using that word object, medicine, vehicles, if you will, or sacred medicine vehicles. I'll just use the word vehicle so that I won't repeat myself with the word object. I don't want to objectify the word object. So my original point with this particular rant, if you will, is please be very discerning. I don't want to say suspicious because that's probably a little too strong, but there's just so much of it right now on the internet, so much of it. And it's just a very knee-jerk reaction that only addresses a very small amount of people who are being disrespectful, and that's fine. If somebody's being disrespectful and doing a certain ceremony that's sacred, that's not in their tradition, and they're doing it, in a disrespectful way, or they're wearing some kind of clothing, or they're doing, and we have common sense, then yeah, sure, report them to AIM or something, or, tell them it's a case-by-case basis. Or if somebody says something on the internet, I think it's okay for other people to do the sun dance who haven't been initiated. No, it's not okay to do that. The ceremony, that is, okay? That's what I'm talking about. Or it's okay to do the ghost dance ceremony that's sacred to the Lakota. Obviously, no, it's not. And unless you've been initiated. And if that's a case-by-case basis, whoever you're talking to, you would literally have to sit them down and say, by the way, I know I'm talking to you on the internet, but I'm not even sure if we're talking about this ceremony, and, who initiated you into this ceremony, or what tribe or whatever, and the person might come back and say, blah, 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 and that would be a separate conversation for you to have with that person if you feel like, but then again, I would say, who are you to be policing them? If you are an elder of a certain tribe and you have a problem with somebody else doing something else from some other organization or whatever, then that's a conversation you should have with that person. And it may involve you, but that's not usually what we see on the internet. What we see on the internet is not these case-by-case basis things. We don't see people having specific conversations like that. What we see are these sweeping generalizations saying, you shouldn't use a certain plant because it's sacred to the dead. Well, there's a lot of things that are sacred to a lot of people that shouldn't be used. Not just Native Americans, or not just, Aboriginal Indians, or not just, I'm not just downplaying that. I'm just saying there's a lot of things that I've learned that are sacred to the people that lived in Europe, that, people that I'm descended from, that, we don't even respect anymore as a Euro descendant, if you're somebody who has any kind of Euro descendants in them. There's plenty of things that we don't even respect of our own culture anymore. So, and there's just so much in the 21st century capitalistic, what do we call modernity, that is so detached and disassociated from an animistic way of living. It's hard enough just to do that, just to try and be an animist in this very detached, disassociated society. Whether you're a practicing animist or not, just trying to do it is really a challenge. So it's almost like I'm telling you, if you have a specific problem with somebody and you feel like you have the pedigree or the elders to back you up on that thing, then go ahead, talk to that person. But if you're not one of those kinds of people and you're just going around telling everybody they're misappropriating things, you're actually causing more harm than good. And I'm a little suspicious if you're that kind of person. Why are you doing this? What is your goal? Do you think you're protecting Native American people by doing this? Do you think you're protecting a culture by doing this? Not so sure about that. Because if we don't have more people, both mixed backgrounds, of both Native American backgrounds, of Aboriginal backgrounds, if we don't have more people relating to the animistic parts of their personalities and their being and their ancestors, because all of us have ancestors no matter where we're from, if we don't have more animistic people relating animistically to the world, we're going to have some problems. We're already having problems. And I think to keep it just assigned to a special small group of people who have enough problems already as it is, trying to keep their territories from being exploited by oil or exploited by God knows how many other things, drilling, fracking, mining. I think the indigenous peoples worldwide have enough on their plate as it is, trying to fend off capitalistic forces, that I don't think we should leave it up to them. When I say we, I mean people who are Euro-descendant or mixed race or just not indigenous, whatever that is. You could be you could be from anywhere, but you're not, maybe not from the country you're living on, or your family isn't from, the country you're living on. I think these, they're a fairly large population, but, there's actually an even bigger population of people who aren't indigenous. And I think that we need to all chip in, so to speak, in terms of being animists. And if there's a big group constantly trying to police everybody else, saying, no, 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 you can't do that. Well, okay, there is a way you can do it, and do it respectfully. So, maybe stop discouraging people. If this doesn't make any sense, or if it's a little too many things at once, I can understand that. It's a very tricky subject for me to even unpack. But I feel it's really, 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 really important. Right now, it's something that's happening so often that I just had to keep talking. I had to get this down. So thank you.